Hey guys, quick video today on taking a look at what different institutions impact and influence the way that Congress makes decisions. So we're going to take a look at three different big ideas. Some you may have already heard about or we have briefly talked about in class. Others are going to be brand new and you're going to watch actually another video by Khan Academy that is going to delve deeper into some of those ideas. This is just a quick overview to get us started on the subject. So what goes into influencing how a Congress member is going to vote on different issues? Well, it's going to be ideology, how and what kind of information they're getting, and money. Okay, these are the three big things that are going to influence what passes through the House and the Senate the most. So let's break down each of these three bullet points here. Taking a look at ideology, this is how a Congress member determines they should act on behalf of the people. And there's three different systems that members of Congress may follow. The first one is a trustee, where what I believe is best for my people and country. So that's where they're voting on their morals, their own decision-making process, their own beliefs. So the belief is that I got voted into this position because people like my thoughts. Okay? The next is a system called a delegate, where you think, what would my people that I'm trying to represent want? I've been elected into this position because I'm really good at touching base with the population back in my district. I'll be able to go back, pull some data, get some voices from back home, and then vote on behalf of what they want, even if it doesn't truly align with what my personal interests are. The final one is what's called a politico, and this is someone who does a little bit of both. They may vote on their conscience, and they may go back and pull that data from their district in order to influence their vote. Now, something you're going to want to start considering is, in your own opinion, what is the best system to have? Do you think that our Congress members follow these systems now? And do you agree with what kind of systems there are? Do you think that people should be making decisions off of their own personal interests, or do you think that they should be getting the voice from the people back in their district? Is that what our founding fathers wanted? There's a lot of debate up in the air about this, so start considering that question. It makes a really good essay question. Hint, hint. All right, next is information. How are our Congress members getting their information? Last week we touched on interest groups already, okay, so like the NAACP, the NRA. There's all of these different interest groups that are funded by their members. They then use that money to pay lobbyists, and lobbyists are the experts on different topics. So lobbyists will go into different congressional committee sessions or onto the House or Senate floors, provide the data that is relevant to either passing or failing a bill. Now, I'm sure you guys know, but even if you have data, it can be skewed. Okay, so how is data being presented to Congress members? Is it being presented in a way to favor a piece of legislation, or is it being presented to make a piece of legislation look really bad? What kind of data is being shown? Okay, is it firsthand accounts? Is it cold calls out to the public? Is it different types of charts that maybe represent the data in a misleading way? And then who is actually presenting the data? Is it someone who's just been hired, like a staff member? Is it a scientist who actually collected the data and ran experiments? Okay, that can all significantly impact how our members of Congress are being educated. Now, we talked a little bit about this last week of, are lobbyists and interest groups a good thing or a bad thing? You can go either way here. On one side, we don't want to have interest groups because you have someone outside of the electoral process starting to write legislation and influencing different laws that are going through the system. Okay, so on that side, not so good. Not what maybe our founders intended. On the other side, our Congress members are so busy and they're not able to be experts on so many different things, so they need to have brief education periods where they're able to talk to the experts who really know what they're talking about. So it's a chance to allow our Congress members to be voting educatedly. Lastly, what influences, again, our legislative process is money. Okay, you guys are seniors, are starting to get to the point where you're understanding money kind of rules the world and it's going to make the decisions for a lot of different things. So as you know, the legislative branch has the power of the purse. Okay, so they are the ones that are controlling and delegating who is getting money and when. So this starts out in what's called the Appropriations Committee, and they are the ones that truly have that money power. They're the ones structuring different bills, balancing the budget, and they are then controlling that budget for the judicial branch, executive branch, states, federal governments, all of that. Okay, so we've got two categories of our budget that the Appropriations Committee has to consider when looking at our purse. Okay, we've got mandatory spending and discretionary spending. And all funds are going to fall into either of these two categories. Our mandatory spending are things that are legally binding. So you can go find them in law, you can go find them in the Constitution, other maybe executive orders. Okay, so they have to be met every single year. You know you can always expect to have to pay those things. So for example, we've got Social Security. Okay, Congress knows that they are collecting taxes every year, and they know that they're going to have to, every year, hand out Social Security amounts to the nation. On the other hand, you got discretionary spending, where if we have extra in our budget, it's all the others, the things we didn't expect. Maybe we have a new military movement. Maybe there's a new initiative when it comes to education. Or say COVID is a thing that happens and we need to plan as a nation on how to help keep our economy thriving. Okay, so again, our fiscal budget falls into those two categories: mandatory spending and discretionary spending. Now, when you have that conversation about discretionary spending, since it's not legally tied to anything, that money, that's where we start to have debates about who gets that money and why they get that money. And because of that disagreement between the states or different members of Congress, that's really where we see our gridlock happening. And the gridlock is happening either between the chambers or the parties themselves. Again, so like who is getting that money? It's not currently allocated to someone, and it's basically who is able to convince each other the most or have the best argument of who gets that discretionary spending money out of the federal budget. So when we see this argument process happening, we have this term here that comes into play. It's called earmarking, or otherwise known as pork barrel legislation. Earmarking is essentially setting aside money and promising that money for a certain state, so that way they can use it on a project. And by promising a state or a specific district money in this piece of legislation, you're trying to better persuade that person to vote yes on the bill that you're trying to pass through Congress. Okay, so these are used for projects like road construction, a new dam that needs to get fixed, or bridges, or maybe it's some type of urban housing project that is really aggressively going on in your state. Okay, so whatever it is, it's that specific project that money is set aside for a state in order to convince them to vote on a piece of legislation. Typically, when we see earmarking become really controversial, it's because there's been money set aside in a bill, say in an amendment or a change in a bill, that has nothing to do with the actual overall idea of that piece of legislation. So this could be an education bill, and down in the different sections of the bill, we have money set aside for a bridge to be built in Idaho, right? They in no way have anything to do with each other, but again, it's that money trying to convince a senator or representative in order to vote for this piece of legislation. Okay, so it's controversial not only because is it right, is it what our country is meaning to do with the funds, but also is it really up to Congress to be funding small projects in the state? Again, that idea of federalism of whose role is it to cover what issues? Should Congress be doing these small things, and is it kind of considered favors in return for getting a yes vote? Okay, so because it is such a controversial issue, it was actually outlawed for Congress in 2011. Now, just because it was outlawed doesn't mean that it's over. Okay, there are a couple of different data gathering companies, independent agencies who have done investigations into this process of earmarking, and we're finding that this process is still happening, even as recently as 2017. So even though it's outlawed, still a process that is absolutely being used in Congress. Here we have two different charts that show not only the number of earmarks that are occurring here in Congress, but also the costs of the earmarks. So as you can see, back in 1991, okay, probably close to maybe 50 to 75 per year earmarks that are taking place. Then we get up to more recently, maybe 2010, right? Because that's the point where we should have been banning the use of earmarks. We have all the way up over 9,000 earmarks that are taking place each year in Congress. And at that point where we have over 9,000 earmarks, we're also spending $15.9 billion on this earmark process. So definitely money is going to influence the way that Congress members are going to vote on the different issues. So just as a quick recap, we took a look at ideology. Are you a delegate, a politico system, a trustee? We took a look at interest groups and the role that they can play on education of Congress members voting on issues. And then money. What role does money have in convincing Congress members to vote a certain way? So at this point, you are going to go ahead and close out my video and go and watch a Khan Academy video where they're going to really break down the difference between earmarking, pork barrel legislation, and really delve into what it is and why it may be so controversial.